We're gonna start, and the other people can actually just join in. And join as they join in. There's quite other people, a few people that are on the queue. There's few people that are on the queue that are being admitted. But let me welcome everybody to the October webinar. My name is Portia Dausikati. I'm the CEO of the Property Sector Charter Council, and thank you to the audience for joining us on this webinar today on the challenges and opportunities of the property industry in the ever unending crisis and uncertainties of our political economy in South Africa. So this webinar, it will last for about just under about an hour and a half, even slightly shorter. They're happy to take, we're going to be taking questions as well. So we will allow Dr Lehohla to actually be able to present. But I will actually just quickly, before I introduce him, I will do just an opening remarks. But while we do so, can I urge everybody to remain muted with your cameras off? And please feel free to send all your questions on your chat box throughout the webinar. Raise your hands. Our team are behind the scene. They will be in the lookout for your hands and your chats, and we will certainly filter them to our speaker. And the webinar will also be recorded and also shared with you on the YouTube channel, and also the presentation link as well. So, but for us to actually be able to send you also the presentation, please make sure that you've registered and you've got you're registered on that link that we have sent you, and then we will certainly be able to then share with you the presentation as well. But in the chat box, the team will send you also the link to the registration, so that you also have the link to the registration. With that said, obviously, before I introduce our honorable speaker, obviously, just to give you just opening remarks of our October webinar under the topic, the challenges and opportunities for our property sector in an ever-ending crisis and uncertain political economy of South Africa. Yes, as you know, today, we want to share some common phenomena that often occurs before the elections in our country. You know that in 2024, South Africa will be hosting its elections, and it is a state of paralysis, a time where everything seems to come to a standstill. It is a period of uncertainty where businesses, citizens, and various stakeholders tend to hold their breath and adopt the wait-and-see approach. And why does this happen, you might wonder? Well, the reason is simple, because everybody is eager to understand and who holds the reins of power and what political stance they employ to navigate the ship of the state. During this time, it is our nation's collective, it is as if our nation takes a collective pause, a moment of reflection, and as we anticipate the outcome of our elections. Business leaders in particularly are keen observers as they want to gauge the potential impact of the election results on their operations and investments. They want to know what policies and strategies the new leadership will embrace, and how will that impact their decision and might influence their areas of interest. The state of paralysis often prevails because political landscape are greatly shaped they greatly shape our direction in our country and that it takes, and the decision made by the elected official impacts everything from the economy to the education, to infrastructure, to social and environmental policies, and so on. You know, it's actually a myriad of those areas that it's actually impacted. Therefore, the uncertainties that comes before an election, it's not just a wait of the name of from the ballot papers where we've actually put our mark. It's about a wait to see which path our nation will take, which values it will uphold, and what new initiative it will set in motion. It is in this time of the pre-election paralysis that there is this unique blend of anxiety and hope. The anxiety about the unknown, the potential change, their consequences, and the hope that the elected leaders will steer our nation in the right direction, addressing our collective concerns and aspirations. It is in this moment when we reflect the importance of participating in a democratic process, making informed decisions, and actively engaging in the future that we want to actually shape. So as we find ourselves in this state of anticipation, let us remember that this is also our country and our country needs the progress. And it's not only solely in the hands of politicians, but also of our own. It is our responsibility to be well informed and become active citizens, contribute to a democratic dialogue and shape the future we desire. Only we can move beyond the paralysis towards the brighter and more prosperous future. And it is based on that opening remark that I would like to actually introduce our esteemed speaker, Dr. Pali Lehohla, who is the director of EMA, which stands for Economic Modeling Economy, which aims to empower democrats, civil society, academia, corporates in use, various corporates that are in use, and also they use applications and policies, engagements through the use of integrated web-based tool of economic scenario setting, quantification, monitoring, and evaluation. He is the founding chair of Statistician Commission of Africa, Statscom Africa, and chaired the African Symposium of Statistical Development, AASD. Dr. Lehohla has been a powerful and forceful advocate of improving the civil registration and vital statistics systems in Africa. He is the vice president of the International Statistics Institute, ISI. Since 2018, he became a research associate of Oxford University and professor of practice at the University of Johannesburg, UJ. Since 2002 September to date, he has been a weekly columnist of the Business Report. And since May 2022 to date, he is a weekly columnist of the South Africa of the Sunday Times Daily Online, regular contributor on the Leadership magazine. So he is indeed, you will agree that with that background that has been given, there couldn't have been a better person to share their views and assessments on this particular topic today on the challenges and opportunities of the property sector in an ever ending crisis and uncertainty of our political economy in South Africa. So it is our former chief statistician of South Africa, Dr. Pali Lehohla. They call it AKA, also known as Mr. Ntate, the Yellow Jacket. And Dr. Lehohla, Dumela, good morning to you. Goeiemorgen, good day to you. How are you? Dr. Lehohla, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Oh, yes, I remain muted. Thank you very much, Portia, for that elaborate introduction that says to us as South Africans, this is the space we never wished to be in at this point in time. We had hoped that we will be like the Boks as they became victorious against the French. And of course, they are left with the UK to beat, and they bring glory to us. We definitely need some glory in our midst. May I share my screen?
With absolute pleasure. The team, can you please give Dr. Lehohla the... Yes, thank you so much. Dr. Lehohla, there you go. Over to you.
Yes, the topic I'm tackling here is an interesting one, and I hope I'll do justice to it. I usually find it difficult to get the top bar of the screen off. I never know how to move it. It interrupts with the titles of the screen. I'll make myself smaller here, and I'll shift this over there, and I just need to shift this part of the screen. But I never know how to do it. I've not managed to find a trick to do it. I've been asked to really discuss challenges and opportunities for the property industry in the ever unending crisis and uncertain political economy of South Africa. And of course, what could be, in part, what one calls the S in the pillar of the ESG, which is, I think, an area that you may have to seek to look at. In order to understand and try and locate myself in the discussion, I have to ask the question, what drove agglomerations? Why do we have agglomerations? Why do we have cities? Why do we have hamlets? Why do we have towns? And what will drive agglomerations? And one has to look at the snippets from COVID-19. And then, of course, I asked the question around three areas I'll be addressing. The second area will be energy, but I'll address it last. I'll go into asking the questions of poverty as an expensive enterprise that we actually invest in all the time, and look at what should happen to it, and what are the possible contributions of the property sector towards a positive solution on poverty. I'm sitting here in Sandton today, and I'm looking over Alex, and I'm saying, is there a solution to this problem, or have we not normalized the abnormal? Now, in order to understand the drivers of agglomerations, one has to look at Egypt and how the civilization of pyramids and centers of learning, mathematics and science that emerged. And of course, therein you find a lot of cultural economic geography, which became the driver of this civilization. Egypt's source of life is the River Nile. And it is around the River Nile that people started to be sedentary. And as they became sedentary, there were a lot of things that went well beyond being sedentary and managing agricultural production. But they built pyramids, which today still remain a mystery. Not many understand how did these people move those rocks to build those pyramids. What did they use? It's still a mystery of science that is still not understood. They farmed and used canals to irrigate. And then population started growing around the Nile River. Egypt, Cairo today, has been transforming as a modern city. And the population of Egypt are still found along the River Nile. 90% of the population of Egypt are along the River Nile. And water still becomes a major theme of Egyptian life. In fact, manufacturing has also taken off as the mainstay of Egypt. This table that we cannot see very well just shows what the GDP of Egypt in billions, what the GDP in terms of purchasing power parities, what the economy of Egypt size is, and what the GDP per capita is there, what the growth rate has been, and what has the inflation been, and yeah, that's the inflation. Here I need to move this ribbon here. I don't usually know how to move it up. Yeah, so that's Egypt. And then of course, what is debt to GDP ratio, which is the last column? Egypt's debt to GDP ratio is 94%. Its growth rate has been is now at 5.9%, and its per capita GDP purchasing power parity is $14,000, and its GDP using purchasing power parity is 1.5. It's 3 times what the purchasing power parity GDP says it is. Now, if we look at Kimberley, the city of gold, of diamonds, this is how it looked when it was started. And that's what Kimberley is now, a gaping hole. Well, there are agglomerations, but diamonds have long left that big hole. And Kimberley is more or less a ghost town that probably survives on real estate, which is the business in which you are yourselves. And then the Johannesburg City of Gold, its establishment, the agglomerations were driven by gold significantly. And the gold has been the mainstay of South African economy for a very, 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 very long time. Although now it has started losing its shine, but the city also of Johannesburg has lost its shine, as we know. And in many ways, some of the things that drive us there in the city are crime. Although a lot of movement has been now towards Sandton. That's where we see the city of Joburg shifting to Sandton. Now, in the study of space economy, there is something called urban function index. I'm sure people who are in property know better than I do, and central place index. Urban function index and central place index tend to track one the other. As you can see that the central place index there in red, and the urban function index, and the urban function index is the degree of concentration of activities that relate to the urban function, which is industrial activities. So in my first question of what drove agglomerations, we have seen that minerals, agriculture in the case of Egypt started the agglomerations, minerals in the case of South Africa. And of course, as time went on, we found that manufacturing, the conurbation of Germiston and all those other places in the East Rand were conurbations that created Ekurhuleni and all those places, and they grew as a consequence of manufacturing. So it is these things that, you know, have caused agglomerations. And in the case of South Africa, here we see Johannesburg still as the lead city in terms of both the urban function index and the central place index. And hot on its heels has arisen Durban in terms of urban function index. And then, of course, Sandton has started making inroads. So is Cape Town. And then the rest of the cities, and those who come from Bochum, my darling, they'll find that city space somewhere far from this tail end of. So the rank of city spaces show the level of concentration. And of course, we see position of the largest, of the 50 largest centers in South Africa, showing a very heavy concentration here. This concentration, as we look at it, has been a consequence of what agricultural activities might have been taking place there. And the examples I've raised have been largely, of course, for Egypt, agricultural activities. In terms of South Africa, it has been the extractive industries, mining, particularly in the case of Kimberley and Johannesburg itself. And then, of course, in the case of South Johannesburg, manufacturing took root as an activity emerging out of extractive industries. And Johannesburg, interestingly, is one of the few countries, cities that are found in the middle, not on the seaboard, and they're becoming the biggest city in the country. So, unlike other cities that are found on the seaports, Johannesburg is unique in that kind of. And of course, we see as the mining declined, we saw commerce taking place, and that commerce including real estate services, recreation, cultural activities, religious activities, and public organization. And public organization, in the case of Pretoria, becoming a major driver of that agglomeration that we have seen in Pretoria, as well as, of course, in Cape Town with the parliament there. So all these playing an interactive role in themselves in terms of agglomerations. Now, then comes COVID. When COVID struck, and by the way, one of my own experiences here is that, real estate has been a main emergent driver of agglomerations. If we think about Sandton, it's been just real estate, it's been commerce, real estate, and all the services playing a major role in bringing business together. And when COVID struck, we found a situation that was very interesting. And we started seeing people working from home. And people working from home relate to these 5 layers here at the top, which is layer 9 public services, layer 8, layer 6 irrigation, and layer 5, which are services and commerce. So all layers related to commercial activities. So as we see this, we see less so people working from home for elementary services, as well as sales, which is up here as layer 6 or layer 7, which is sales, and machine operators, and of course domestic workers are by nature coming. So there is an emergent question around what will drive agglomerations in the future. Because if you can work from anywhere, we have to ask the question, if you can work anywhere, what will be the driver of agglomerations? We actually saw during COVID, spaces getting empty, businesses, real estate finding that the spaces are getting empty. At STSA, we had just built a 4,000 lettable space, 4,000 employees, with a 40,000 lettable space in the 60,000 overall, but 40,000 lettable. And suddenly this office that we built at great cost remains half empty. And that's a big question that we have to really ask ourselves. So you can see that the tertiary sector part here, the secondary sector, the primary sector, which was initially the driver of agglomerations, the secondary sector, which drove that, and the tertiary sector, which drove that. But there is a bigger question as to whether the tertiary sector can actually be a driver of agglomerations. The key question is, what then is the future? What are the new drivers of agglomerations? It is a big question that property managers have to ask themselves. I'll come back to this question of drivers of agglomerations as I go towards the end of the presentation. One of the things that we in South Africa did in 2001 was that there was a reaction by government to look at what nodes can be developed. And of course, in the urban centers, one of those was Alex itself and many others. And at the time when decision was taken, was about 2002, and we didn't have any data. And a lot of hunch was directed this kind of decision of what nodes should be provided with services so that we start changing the face of South Africa. So when we now look at 2001 and say, in 2011, these measures here are measures of poverty. And we are looking at how did the identification of the nodes, given the poverty that probably we thought they had, what happened subsequently in the reduction of poverty. For rural nodes, certainly they were very poor, it's clear, and we see reduction of poverty coming at 14.6%. Urban nodes, 17%, poverty coming down to 6%. When we look at rural South Africa, comparative to rural nodes, we see that the targeting probably was quite, the rural nodes had a problem. They were well identified and their poverty declined when you compare them to rural South Africa overall. And so the targeting was quite right. But when you come to urban nodes, and we look at urban South Africa, you see that the identification of the nodes certainly were not as efficient as the identification of rural nodes. In fact, urban South Africa had, even as an aggregate, had bigger problems in itself than the urban nodes that were identified. And of course, the urban nodes, of course, got a bonus of poverty being reduced up to 6% compared to urban South Africa, which only moved up to 8.1%. So, then of course, overall South Africa, 18.2 to 6.4. So here one asks the question, was the targeting the right thing? It looks like it wasn't, except for the rural nodes. For the rest of the country, for the urban South Africa, it wasn't the most appropriate. One could have just used the spray can approach. The results will be the same. Obviously, people didn't have the kind of data that was necessary. Part of the US property people, the policy space in South Africa said that what is needed is densification. And this densification, we are looking at the population density in South Africa in the geometry. Here we can see that in census 2001, this was the concentration. In census 2011, we see that this was the concentration. Yet the densification was supposed to be in this area here. But we have seen continued densification at the periphery. In fact, that intensifying. And with the current census results having been released, we will see how that densification has happened, whether it has happened in the center or at the periphery. And we have seen a lot of urban sprawl. And I think for you as a property people, you have an interesting perspective on this. Part of the problem of this densification is the uncertainty that we are talking about, politics, the politics of our times. The politics of our times do give uncertainty. And particularly our constituency politics. I mean, all politics are based on constituency. But here you can see this urban sprawl happening despite our intention to densify here. And in good part, we see this urban sprawl all over. And with an election coming next year, one sees urban sprawl in all kinds of places. And one wonders what the role of politics are in this urban sprawl, so that they can create their own constituencies, so that they can be voted into power. Now, here we are looking at domestic, residential property. And in terms of this residential property, one has to say, do we have, the question that we have to ask is whether we are having human settlements. And under human settlements, we expect that the spread of satisfaction for these attributes that give us human settlement, the attribute of human settlement, give us, in the light of this urban sprawl that I've just shown, you realize that with the shacks and everything, the degree and the extent of satisfaction is so dispersed that you cannot talk about human settlements in South Africa at all for a lot of people. And you can see these are municipalities, and the spread out like that shows that you cannot talk about human settlements. Well, you as people in buildings, and of course, here we are looking at value of buildings completed in this year that we are, and this is per courtesy South Africa. We can see that, year on year, May to 2023, percentage changes here. We see declining percentages month on month, but here month on month change and a 3-month change here, we see growth there about 1.8%. As in buildings completed, the value of buildings completed. I've talked about agglomerations, and here we are looking at what are the things that affect our agglomerations as currently as South Africa. We see crime, burglaries, 1 million, which is growing by 5.7%, home robbery by 1%, and the others, deliberate damage, murder, and all these things that are really hurting the country. And of course, here, these are the trends in crime, which basically affect people both in business and at their households. And this is the trend. Here we're given mercy by COVID, which meant that all this slowed down. Here are trends in home robbery. These are trends in theft of motor vehicles. They have declined somewhat, 2021, and then of course 2022, 2023, we are seeing this return again. And here we are seeing murder as a big issue, and a number of, and here we are seeing all these coming back, rate of murder by year. There we are, a number of households reporting.
Paying a bit of money for something that's supposed to work and it doesn't work, and now we go and spend more money to run it somewhere else, you know, unless he runs it.
Okay. Including myself, I have to unmute myself. And of course, here we are looking at a residential price index. We can see that the residential property price index very high in the Western Cape, growing at 137%, Northern Cape 103, and national, the growth is 97%.
Just keep on muting them. Sorry for the disturbance. Please carry on.
All right. Well, I like the conversation. And of course, here we are looking at what has happened in terms of buildings completed at current prices, residential and non-residential. And here, if we look at year-on-year changes between April and 2021 to 2022, the record is quite, you don't get a 38% change between a year in completed residential. It looks like the property market is fairly buoyant. Of course, the flats, there we see a change in that. Then the municipalities by Western Cape, you can see the billions that have actually 5 billion for Western Cape for that period under review, and all in all 6 billion. The others really lifting very lowly, and of course Gauteng coming at a very small amount relative to Western Cape, both residential reported, and of course this is what the growth rates have been. This is the average for the country, and Western Cape flies high up there above the national average. Gauteng is below the national average of 197, so it's Northwest and so on. And what are the kinds of things that put challenges to properties? Here we all see that the electricity tariffs, we are seeing this growing at 15%, water charges at 9%, and property rates at 8.4%. All these are way above inflation rate of about 5%, and therefore they weigh heavily on citizens. Now, looking at Alan Greenspan, who was the head of the Fed for a number of years, and he was reflecting on the 2008 financial crisis, and the driver of that financial crisis was property market. And he actually looks at this and says, where does the line lie between, dividing line lie between financial markets and property and real estate, where because the non-financial institutions are based, as he says, on objective reality and its probability structure. Finance, however, is almost wholly behavioral animal spirits. So your challenges as you look at this issue of what should drive agglomerations. Whether you are actually paying attention to the non-financial, as a non-financial institution relative to your proximity to finance. How do you articulate your relations? And here, the financial, what cost us a lot was the proximity of the non-financial being overtaken by the financial. And of course, this came via the property market, an area in which you are. See, Milton Friedman, who was the main man of privatize mantra, towards the end of his life, he says he was wrong in saying privatize. That mantra was wrong. He says I was wrong. That was not enough. He told an audience of perplexed conservatives. After all, Hong Kong and Singapore, once touted as mighty little engines of globalization, and become examples of market-oriented models yielding less freedom. Property was sacred. And then they say, well, elections were not, but property was very, very, very sacred. So in the market in which you are, the mantra privatize, as Milton Friedman would do in the 70s when we started seeing a lot of neoliberal policies emerge, says that mantra was wrong. And we see that mantra playing itself out in Greenspan's words that the non-financial are more stable, whereas the financial are more an animal spirit. Now, here is where you play in terms of your malls, large shops, and so on. And we see very heavy concentrations of large shops. Large shops. 32%, private service providers, 34%. Well, comparatively speaking, similar to Nigeria. But in South Africa, the problem of this is that these are things that are in white hands. So you see 34 plus this is 67%, more or less 67%, and they're heavily concentrated in one race group. Whereas here in Egypt and here in Nigeria, you see really distribution of this amongst the population itself. So here I'm looking at what do we do to try and resolve problems of poverty and inequality. I'm changing gear now to what drives agglomerations into what are the agglomerations consisting of and what their implications on poverty are. And of course, here you see large shops, private services, and street outlets, and these other small things. That's where blacks actually play a role. Even in the small shops in South Africa, we see a lot of constellation between the locals and the foreigners. Across the continent, you see a lot more even distribution of these outlets. And the effects of that even distribution is that you see the Gini coefficient, that is inequality, being reduced because people are participating in the business. Whereas in South Africa, there's just too much concentration, especially only in one race. What are the implications of all these of South Africa in terms of its growth, in terms of its path? And here we are looking at the world from 1990 and looking at what happened to China over up to 2020. Here we are looking at this from a lens of international comparisons program, and we can see China becoming almost the biggest economy, catching up with the United States, India coming, and of course soon surpassing Japan, and the heroes of the last becoming less so. And we see the Russian Federation also coming up. China has surpassed the US in terms of purchasing power parity by 2018. In fact, this happened in 2014, and of course it surpassed the US quite significantly. What that means is that this is what China looks like and what US looks like, and this is where our continent is, and this is where South Africa is. The question is South Africa at 0.6% and Nigeria at 0.7%, and here we have Egypt at 1.1%, percent in terms of its GDP purchasing power parity. Where does South Africa want to be in the future? That's the question. And how will you make it possible for them to be there as a property market? Here we are looking at what are the price level indices of the world, and we see South Africa here with a very high price level index. Here we measure this side price level index. This side we measure per capita, or rather per capita based GDP. And we see South Africa at the same level of per capita GDP, but itself being very, very expensive compared to Egypt, as well as compared to Nigeria, although Nigeria has a low per capita income. And the first slides that I showed of Egypt relative to South Africa are too telling. And you can see how Egypt actually grew its per capita income by focusing on its agriculture, moving from agriculture into manufacturing. And Egypt is now a serious contender in manufacturing and exporting. You can see how that trajectory changed. Of course, they have 105 million people. We are 62 million people ourselves. Now, in South Africa, the cost of living is very high, as I've shown. Here, main mode of travel is a taxi, very, very inefficient mode of travel. And of course, train has actually dropped from 2013 to the number of trips a train takes. Instead of 50 million per annum, now it is only 2 million trips. So it's very, 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 sorry, per month. This is very disturbing when you look at the number of trips. Of course, when the rail line has been stolen, cut, and that impacts your market. Travel and real estate are connected. And the choices that one makes in terms of how real estate is located, in terms of travel, business, where do people buy, how do they buy, and most of the time, our urban areas do show that, especially in the townships, it shows a very undesirable situation. And of course, what we see here is travel costs have actually been more significant in the choice people have in terms of travel rather than travel time. Before it was travel time because the taxis take you to a point of, but with increasing costs, people are starting to rationalize, dropping the travel time driver as a driver of choices from 33% to 23%, but considering cost as a driver, 26 to 31%. Now, we have to think about who is a builder. Women used to build. Now men took over the building once it has a scaffold. Women who used to build and plaster rondavels have been thrown out of the market. So one of the issues that as we look at these things, we have to think about what happens to women because one of the matters we have to be thinking about as society is how we respond to our women. I see that I'm running out of, might just have my battery dying here. So I have to resource myself with a battery. So the problem of poverty is stated by Amartya Sen. Human lives are battered and diminished in all kinds of different ways. And the first task is to acknowledge that deprivations of very different kinds have to be accommodated within a general overarching framework. So as we think about what we do with the property market, sorry, I'm just checking that I've switched this on. With the property market, we actually have to be thinking about poverty because the poor, if they cannot have property, as was shown that when people have property like in Hong Kong and Singapore, everything else becomes easier to achieve. So in terms of really looking at poverty, we have these multidimensional poverty measures. And these multidimensional poverty measures measure particularly goal one, and poverty in all its forms everywhere. And these poverty measures look at matters, property ownership, and so on and so on. And of course, It covers a number of targets, and 52 countries actually meet to discuss multidimensional poverty. And the MPI advances SDG strategies. So you yourselves in the property market, which is very important, have to start thinking about how this poverty drives itself. As African countries, we met here in 2015 and adopted this multidimensional poverty index and said, how are we going to use this multidimensional index for ourselves, which would look at how do people achieve a high level of living. These are the kinds of, they play a role in national plan, and they look at health, education, and living standards. And here, under living standards, we also look at housing, electricity, and assets. And I want to invite you to look at this for yourselves as the uncertainty deepens in the country. And here we have to look at who are the poorest by profiling them. And if they are poor in 3 or in more than 3 areas, with this cutoff point of 25 or 33%, we actually label such a person as a poor. And then that delivers targeted budgeting. And of course, that's computation of this MPI, and we disaggregate. And of course, this is how we represent a multidimensional poverty graphically: nutrition, child mortality, sanitation, and there is your housing there. And then of course, you have to monitor and evaluate in order not to leave anyone behind. And I've talked about urban sprawl, and urban sprawl shows that there is a lot of multidimensional poverty. Juan Manuel Santos, who is the former president of Colombia, actually is part of our team at Oxford. And for him to resolve the crisis that they had of Colombia, over 50 years, they were fighting with guerrillas in Colombia. And he was the Minister of Defense, and he could unleash the military on these people. But in time, as he became the president, he had to sit down and say, how do we resolve this? And he embedded the multidimensional poverty to try and bring social compact. And I think you all yourselves, as people who are running malls, who are running all this, have to be considering that. In terms of our multidimensional poverty in South Africa, especially for the young people who are 15 to 34, it's educational attainment that drives their poverty. Having no one in the household working, and not for them being in school or in employment or any training institute, they become. Assets such as dwelling type, energy, and so on, sanitation, do not count that much for them. But these are the things that drive their unease as young people. And 60% of their poverty, or yes, 66% of their poverty is actually based on unemployment and so on. And these are people who in future should be the people who work on the market. So in terms of your ESG, the question that we have to ask is, as we go with National Treasury Outlook 2028, 2018, 2026, can we start using different measures rather than be driven by debt to GDP ratio and these figures that you see here? Investments, they are important. But if we cannot look at the impact that what we have been looking at here has, in the general population, we see that multinational poverty over a period of time from 2001 to 2016 has actually been growing, or the share of unemployment as a driver of multidimensional poverty has been increasing from 33 to 40%, from 40% to 52%. And combine that with lack of education across time, 2001 to 2011, 2016, same year, 2001, 2011, 2016, you add this 11% plus 52%, you get 63% as a core driver of the poverty in South Africa that is ravaging human lives. And we should start shifting and using different measures in order to hold our political systems responsible and yourselves. And of course, in Colombia, the private sector, this presidential committee sits with the private sector, with the public sector, in order to discuss this reduction of poverty and inequality as a matter of course. And of course, they have seen that they've been making progress on educational achievement, on all that, but long-term unemployment, not so much, and formal employment, not so much. But in all the other green areas, they are making progress. And this is changed between 2011 and 2012. And these changes are quite significant. If you look at the level of significance, they are quite significant. And it's within a year. And you can imagine if you had this kind of instruments and you meet yearly to think about what happens to poverty, then it is possible to target poverty and deal with it. Well, you sit in a very good position. What we know in the world is that the developed world uses their pensions to deal with the challenges of development. In ourselves, the developing world, we want to go for sovereign debt. We go and borrow money. In South Africa, we have 17 trillion of wealth that you have. And side by side with that, we have 3 trillion from government pensions, or 2.2 trillion. Why should we actually go to the open markets to borrow? This is the question we must start asking ourselves. Why is it? Obviously, we know that the politicians have disappointed us and have stolen. But if we go to borrow from somebody else, that somebody will ask us a premium. And they know that if we fail to pay, they'll come to the pensions that we have. They'll come and mortgage the country itself. So why don't we confront corruption and this misrule rather than borrow from somebody else in the name of saying, well, it's easier there. This is the discussion that we have to have in order to see to it that we get things better. And of course, I've been saying that South Africa, we have a regional market that we have to be looking at as Africa. And we have to look at this price level indices that I've talked about on Egypt. And here I'm just showing that the price of bread can be very expensive depending on what language you speak in the West Africa. If you speak English, it gets very expensive. If you speak French, it gets cheaper. This is the price of bread here in Southern Africa, Angola, Namibia. In Lesotho, people there, I come from there, people prepare their own bread, and bread gets cheaper because they grow their own crops and need their own bread. As we think about creating human settlements, we have to be thinking about how do we make bread affordable and all those other things in life affordable. One of the things that you operate in, not only in South Africa, you operate in different markets, I'm sure, in housing. But here we have the region of SADC. And when you try to look at the information that reflects on SADC, you realize that actually this is not a region. If you want a region, you want to see something that moves towards a common price level, the PLI. And here you can see the differences there. So what are our problems? Our problems in South Africa are about how we think about planning. We have been talking about planning all the time without planning. And we have now 10 things or 14 things in 20 or 28 years, which is a plan every 2 years, a toy for the nation every 2 years. And I want to leave you with, before I go into the energy issue, I want to leave you with an assessment matrix of a system. And this, on the vertical side, looks at stakeholder expectations. On the horizontal, looks at stakeholder satisfaction. This is saying my battery is about to die. How can that be? Oh. Oh no, I think I've got it right now. I didn't switch. This is an assessment matrix. I said here is stakeholder expectations and here is stakeholder satisfaction. Now, if stakeholder expectations are high and stakeholder satisfaction is low, the action is to prioritize. I think you may sit and think about as South Africa, as stakeholders in South Africa, where are we satisfied? Except, of course, the box playing very well yesterday, 2 days ago. Where do we actually derive sense of satisfaction? And Meposhia, you said the anxiety. And here is where South Africa is. And here is, if the stakeholder expectations are high and satisfaction is high, this is where the box has put us momentarily. And of course, they will heighten our satisfaction even more on Sunday when they play or when they find the final bell, the final whistle is blown. Now, there are specific things that have to be done in each of these quadrants. And there is a specific assessment of the state of affairs. And you can take several things and put them in these quadrants to measure them. And I have tried to do that. And here, when everything is a priority, you really are in comatose. The state is failing. Here is where you maintain things. Here is where you innovate, and here is where you drop everything. And unfortunately, South Africa is in this prioritized quadrant, and certainly is characterizing us as a failing state. Now, I want to go on to the new energy system. Is the energy system that we are having and deliberating on the ultimate? And I'll just stop sharing here, and then I'll ask to start sharing again. But this is something that you, as the property market, will have to consider. I've got the instrument here in my bag, but it doesn't work that well when one is online. But I'll just go into a video that shows this thing for you to see. So I just need to get into my emails, and then I'll open the video. And before it starts, I hope I will then ask to share the screen again. I stopped sharing the screen. I got to go here. Now, this is a BBT at play. I want to share the screen. And here is my video. I want to share it. And I'm here with my friend Mujalefa Murphy, and I want to share this video. I hope you will hear the voice. Let me just see that I've got the voice at maximum, and I will play this video. It shows the technology generated by M-Cycle, MySesenko. The long and short of it is that when you use M-Cycle, your demand for energy will drop by 90%. Put differently, your cost of energy, which is a big driver in your malls, using this technology will drop by 90%. And we have a possibility of actually manufacturing this here in the country. And let me play it.
Dr. Pali, we are unable to hear the
Hello,
video.
man. Pardon?
We're unable
Hello,
to hear
man.
the video.
You can't hear the video?
Yes.
Oh my God. What could I do then? I do not know how to. Oh, can I don't know how to make it laudable because I should have had an outlet speaker projecting onto it because my volume was at tops. Well, maybe we should take questions, and as we take questions, I'm with my colleague Mujalifa Murphy, and on the question of the energy, he will be able to talk on that. But the M-cycle technology basically reduces your costs, and it uses very climate compliant materials. They used on organic natural materials, except plastic, which can be biodigestible, and just uses air and water, and is based on Tesla's theory of psychrometric energy in the air that you can harvest, and everybody then can actually access energy, which is really our big problem in South Africa, and the big challenge for yourselves as at your malls, retail stores, at your data centers, in the homes that you are looking at. This will actually be very, very impactful. And I think the demonstration was just showing that no matter what heat, how hot it is, the M-cycle translates that heat, absorbs it, and then the output air comes at a cooling level, but at only at 90% saving from conventional cooling systems. But let's get the questions. We'll share the link so that people can look at it at their own time.
So much.
I cannot hear you, man.
We still can't hear you, Ms. Fortune.
Sure, I'm not audible. Can you hear me now?
Okay, now you're audible.
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, super. Thank you
Right.
so much. Dr. Lehohla, sorry, man. We couldn't hear the video, but I think, as you said, we will then share it. We will also just share it, but we also got a little bit of that explanation from you in terms of how the system works. And thank you so much. We will actually be able to actually share the link so that our members can also just be able to just also go through that. But thank you so much for the presentation. I mean, really, what an interesting one, particularly where we actually saw. I liked where you actually showed a number of comparison between South Africa, Egypt, Nigeria, capita income, and where we are, and how travel and real estate are connected and its impact. I liked actually the last part before this video on the assessment metrics. Really, it really talked to exactly being able to help us assess where we are in relation to that. But thank you so much. Let me see if there are any chat question. I'm monitoring on my chat currently. I can't see any question. Please feel free. I think you'll be muted from the team will mute you there. If there are any hands, please do indicate, and then the team will be able to see your hands and then unmute you accordingly. Let me actually see if there are any hands at all. Okay, to the team, is there any questions on the chat? No, okay. So I don't have any, I can't see any of the questions. Is there anybody that I'm missing? And I'm looking also, I'm just going through the hands. I think the team, I don't know, I think the team, did you manage to, well, I suppose if, oh, there's somebody from Leatile Letile's got her hand up, or his hand up. I'm sorry, I'm not so sure. And I see also Emma has also got her hand up. Can I just Sis Linda, can you unmute Letile, please? And Emma, please, can you unmute them? Let's start with you, Letile. Go ahead. I'm hoping you're going to be unmuted. Oh, there you go. You're unmuted. Go ahead, Masters.
Yes. Hello, I'm Latile Siyamule. I'm an architect based in South Africa. Yes. I just want to say thank you for the presentation and for the information. It's very insightful. What I can say is, you know, when I look at the South African property issue, real estate industry, it's really a bigger issue. You know what I mean? Because on the other hand, I've noticed, I'm looking at all my classmates, black or white, most of them have left the country. So there's a lot of brain drain. A lot of people study, and some of them are very lucky because South African education is benchmarked with the world. So most of them have left. And I've noticed it starts with many issues like construction mafia, you know, and many issues that are unique to South Africa. So I'll give you an example. We worked on, when I was working for an architect called Michael Hart, we were looking at a lot of social housing, and we are working on a Devland project. When we were working on the Devland project, we built all these nice developments, and then people from the community started coming and asking us, why are we building this side and not building on the other side? You know, you understand what I mean? So you find that some of these issues in real estate, they're very unique to South Africa. So when you, I'll give you an example, when you go to other countries, you find that these issues don't exist. So that issues ends up frustrating a lot of people, and a lot of people start leaving the country. So you find that in that Devland project, when they're still arguing why we built on this side and not on the other side, 2 weeks later, they demolished the whole project. They started throwing stones. And that's unique to South Africa. You don't see that in other countries. So number two, another thing about real estate, another issue why you don't think that people don't participate in real estate, it's xenophobia. When you go to other countries, you find that people from Ghana, Nigeria, Uganda, they're all academics, they're all working together, they're still trying to work together. But when you come to South Africa, you find that there's a lot of xenophobia where people in Botswana, like everyone is black. We don't distinguish between which country you're from. So you find that there's a lot of talent that's studied in the best universities across the world in South Africa. So they end up leaving and going back to their countries and solving those issues out of all those issues. So there's a lot of political issues, there's a lot of xenophobic issues, and there's a lot of safety issues. So I'll give you an example. There's a case study in Botswana where there was a lot of shacks. What the government did is they demolished all the shacks very fast, and then they built social housing, and there was order. Nobody was cheating. Everyone was doing it with order. So you find that the real estate issue in South Africa, it's a very big issue that it can't be solved in one generation. But as people try, and if government also tries, it's one bigger issue. Because I've presented to the government of South Africa before, and somebody asked me, what are you doing for your community? And I'm like, there isn't much I can do. It's just the South African government to see how they can put order into some of these real estate issues, because it starts with housing. You know, when you come to other countries, you find that everybody has a house they live in, you know, and everyone has a place to stay in. So you then see that the dynamics in real estate change. When you're an architect, you don't then want to deal with issues of construction mafia or people fighting for projects in the township and people asking who you are. So now all the professionals are now shifting. The way people are shifting from Hillbrow, all the professionals are now shifting to Sandton and all the Gulf estates where there's order. When you look at projects in Sandton and all these suburbs, there isn't construction mafia. There isn't people threatening people on site. But the bigger issues is in the township. So when people try to solve these issues, they get scared. A lot of things happen. But when you see in other countries, that doesn't happen. So people are trying to solve real estate issues, but they've shifted direction to Sandton, to Bryanston and all those other parts of the world. So the poverty issue, it's another issue, you know. And also there's a different angles to real estate. Some people are musicians that are saving in real estate, and the other angles of doing it. So the real estate issue in South Africa, if you studied in South Africa, it's one big issue. I don't know how it can be solved, and I don't know when it can be solved, but that's all I can say. Thank you.
Latile, thank you so much. And sorry I said
Yes.
Latile, my sister, but yes, indeed,
Yeah.
Latile, my brother, appreciate it. But thank you. You make prevalent points, and I'll allow Dr Lehohla to answer after I also hear Meema as well. And you make a very good point. I actually learned last week, somebody was saying, are you aware that in Mahikeng there's actually no sheds? I said, geez, I actually haven't noticed. I've been to Mahikeng a number of times, but I believe the system that they utilize is also slightly different. I mean, even besides the fact that they also have got a lot of tribal land, when they do give you land in Mahikeng, you actually have, I think, is it 60 days? Even if you put a shack onto the pot of land that they give you 60 days to actually put up a structure. If you don't have anything in 60 days, then it moves to somebody else. And I realized actually that's, you know, so there are those kind of systems that each of the various communities have actually found that has been working with. One wishes very often that we wish that we could actually adopt and it could actually spread across in various areas. Let me take another question. And Dada Semule, thank you so much for that. And really, you make relevant point, and your observation is absolutely, I think it cuts across many of our observation and assessments that we've seen across the thing. Meema Mabele, go ahead. Sis Emma, are you still there? I saw your hand up. Are you good? Okay, not a problem, Dr. Lehohla. Let me get before you come, Dr. Bama Binja, I see your hand. Go ahead, my brother.
Sis Portia and Dr. Lehohla, really, it is an honor to be in this kind of a space. I miss the greater part of the presentation because you only informed me now, but I can't miss the opportunity of us posing one question, which I think maybe Dr. Lehohla would be able to assist us. I'm from Public Works Department. I'm an official there. What is most concerning me, if I may put it across, is the issue of the state and the real estate, that is land as well as properties, that which the state has, with all different custodians within it, in form of different spheres of government. And we miss the opportunity to leverage on the real estate, as well as the opportunity then to assist the economy, that which is struggling, including the fiscus. And I wanted to check as to how can we possibly take this opportunity, particularly with the assets, the open lands, vacant lands, that which the state has, whether it is a municipal, whether it is a provincial, whether it is a national
I don't know what. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Somebody went to the bathroom, splashing the toilet.
No, sorry for that. Sorry for that. I forgot something on the stove. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead, Mama Binja. You are talking about the state's assets. Go ahead.
Yeah, it is concerning to me that we are kind of now, as we speak, we've just received a cost containment instruction from National Treasury. And it means that now we have to stop visiting the sites, have to stop engaging with projects that are currently underway. And all this is happening while we've got a mine in form of real estate, that which I think the value that which is there has not yet actually been realized in terms of sweating the assets that which we have. Much of that is because some of these assets are actually lying in different custodians. There is no kind of an integrated strategy from government in general that which seeks to lift up and make sure that the issue of real estate is looked at it differently from what it has been looked at all these years. Therefore, I just needed to take this opportunity that we have you, Baba, just to maybe assist us in terms of what kind of advice that which you can give to government on this matter. Thank you.
Let me take one last question before I allow Dr. Lehohla. Sizola, I saw your hand up. Please go ahead. Sizzy? Okay. Sizola is not there. I think she dropped off. And Dr. Lehohla, maybe take those two questions from Dr. Lehohla and Bamabinja as well. Those two questions, and then we'll go to another last round before we close up. Go ahead, my good doctor.
Thank you very much, I'll also ask Dr. Lehohla to come in just to explain the technology, because it has, I think it'll take another 5 minutes to do so. But let me try and contribute to the complexities that have been well articulated, which are reminiscent of lawlessness. I mean, the issue is lawlessness. When I talked about urban sprawl, when we were proposing that we should densify in Johannesburg, that urban sprawl is occurring right across the country. And part of it is actually trading votes, because people want constituencies. And in seeking the constituencies so that they can be representatives of ours in parliament, they allow this kind of situation and they encourage it. On the other hand, we don't have a government that sticks to the plan. When we say there is urban sprawl, if you say that is densification, it must be densification, and not find that actually we are urban sprawling. We really don't have a government that can stick to his word. That's the reality. We have a very weak political system. We actually elect people who are very weak into power, and we don't hold them to account. Neither do we hold ourselves seriously and hold ourselves to account. So the mafias become part of the culture. And in the implemented scenarios, we have said this country is a Gwara state. And the priests met recently on TIFSA to discuss issues around Zondo, to discuss issues around electricity, to discuss all these other issues that are very, very, very difficult. And it is clear that we don't have a state. If you look at those quadrants, we are actually in that corner quadrant where we are a failing state. And certainly, how else we are going to escape that? Well, one doesn't want to say God knows, but you can see the unease that South Africans are having. They are meeting in different spaces, in different ways, saying, how do we take power back to ourselves as citizens? And that means citizens as business, citizens as individuals, citizens as civil servants, citizens across. Because this one is is untenable. The mafia, the children having to leave this country to go and work abroad. And of course, those who have trained at different universities in South Africa with civil engineering and all kinds of qualifications, find opportunities abroad. One, because the Europe is getting older and doesn't have manpower to support its infrastructure, and they have plans to make sure that their infrastructure doesn't wane and fade. Unlike ourselves, we don't care about our infrastructure. So it can wane and fade. And we don't have a long-term plan. We have the NDP. It's there for civil servants to quote so that they can go to the treasury and get the budget. After that, they forget everything that is in the NDP. There is no serious planning in the state. I mean, you cannot sit with files sitting side by side and think that that is integration. If you think about the district development model, I mean, it's a joke. When you look at that document and compare it with the documents by the ANC or the government, those two documents are not connecting at the data level. They don't have anything in common. When you think about a plan, you know, you people in buildings who construct, when you think about a plan, you actually have the image of the house long before you start building it. Materials, quantity surveying, all those are there in your head, and you know daily what you have to do. Government doesn't have that. And in fact, you have an image of how that house will look like, including where the toilet will be. Government doesn't have an idea, no clue as to how in 2030 South Africa will look like. So that's the problem here. Now coming to the issue of public works, the one that we are raising. It's true, when you don't know our assets, we don't actually know what we have and what we don't have. And I mean, the austerity measures by the Treasury are almost the madness, the serious madness. Our theory of change is based on the following around development. Is savings are important for investment. That's true, and that is not true. Two, we also know, what we know, having gotten that theory of change as a framing statement, we also know that we don't have savings in South Africa as individuals because we have low levels of education and high unemployment rate. Therefore, we can never, ever raise savings and do anything in this country if we have to believe in the mantra that savings are important for investment. But we also know that South Africa is very rich. It has savings in pensions, both civil servants and the private sector. And we have to deal with the problem of education and unemployment. Yet we do not confront borrowing from our own money that we have in the country, including the minerals underground, including the land that we have, and so on, and use those as assets for investment. And get the Reserve Bank to underwrite all these things that we need. What we have done is to go and target inflation. Inflation targeting is called. And inflation targeting means that we will financialize our real sector, which is real estate, which is property, and find ourselves in the space where Greenspan says, the non-financial sector makes sense. The financial sector is the animal spirit. Now we are in that animal spirit where all investments are played on the JSE and all stock exchange markets, instead of being invested in the real sector. And this is our theory of change. In economics, our theory of development is anchored in savings inspire investments. And we don't say, we actually don't have savings. And when we don't have savings at the individual level or at any level, but we do have savings in pensions and everything. And how do we leverage that? How do we use money as a driver of change for us? I mean, the problem with Eskom is a small problem. A 450 billion rands problem. We have 17 trillion. And why don't we deploy the 17 trillion? The 1 trillion in Eskom, solve that as a problem once off, rather than burden Eskom with debt and then come back and say Eskom owes. So this incongruence and incoherence in our development theory is one that is causing all these problems that make us a very strange place to live in. where our children feel that we can't stay here, we'd rather migrate. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lehohla. Well spotted and actually a very relevant point there. I'm going to take Dr. Mohadime as well. You make a very relevant point, particularly on the pension fund. I actually did see an article this week, particularly from GEPF, particularly the former DG of Treasury, saying we're going to use our pension funds to actually invest. Very relevant and talking exactly to your point. I saw that article this weekend on the Sunday Times, which was quite an interesting article to read, quoting and Date Dondoma Hajani, and as well in terms of as a chairperson of GPF, talking exactly to your point. But the extent to which they will go and how far that takes us is yet to be seen. Let me round up and take that last question from I think it's Dr. Mohadime. Go ahead, my brother. Go ahead.
No, thank you, Chair, and thanks, Dr. Lehohla. It's just a comment. You know, as a public servant, it's difficult to say that the state is failing, but I agree with the comments in responding by Dr. Lehohla of trading of constituencies. But there is the point that I just wanted to raise, Dr. Lehohla, in relation to the sprawling within the periphery, is that one of the observations that one has made is that if you go to the rural and semi-rural, they're building large houses with good designs, and the very same people are building shacks around the periphery in the urban area. So I'm not sure to what extent research has been made to determine that type of behavior and how what the decision should be made or recommendation should be made to assist the state in terms of addressing that issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mohadime. I know it's a comment. You made quite an interesting comment. And actually, quite an interesting comment that I remember having the same conversation that I had with the head of Capitec and housing. I think actually there's two things that actually surprised me when we actually had that conversation. Mainly was also because you would remember that our traditional banks actually never loaned against any developments that does not have an ERF, right? In our housing. However, Capitec and African Bank started to actually do loans against even tribal land. And you remember tribal lands don't necessarily have ERFs. So that was amongst others, one of the areas, I think it was a little bit of a research that we've touched on, that we've seen there, where Capitec and African Bank started to make actually able to loan against those developments that don't have ERFs. But even interesting, the one that actually even sparked my eye in that conversation with the CEO was that that actually Capitec, apparently their vehicle book is actually bigger than all the other traditional banks put together. And I said, geez, that's a strange one. Why is that? Is that because remember your vehicle, they only loan a vehicle, a 5-year-old vehicle, but they started to loan, your old Cressida. It didn't matter how old it is. So they started to actually loan against the Cressida, our uncle's Cressida from God knows when, So, and their vehicle book is actually bigger than the traditional banks together. And I thought that was actually quite an interesting angle. So I think maybe just to make a comment was mainly based on the fact that, how we are starting where the landscape is starting to change and how we're starting to actually see all of these differences in terms of viewing those markets. Guys, I'm going to have to thank you, and because we're going to allow Tate Mjalefa to actually round off with just that explanation that Dr. Lehohla wanted to see. But Eddie, you're going to be my very last one because we do need to round off at the charter time. for us, we do actually stick to what we say. We will need to stick. I'm only allowing it because I know we did start late because people were struggling to switch on. But I'm going to just give you no less than at least no more than a minute to actually make your comment, and then give Dr. Mojalefa and Dr. Lehohla to round off before we actually adjourn the call. But and Dr. Eddie, go ahead. One last before Dr. Lehohla makes, and Dr. Mojalefa also make a comment, and lastly on the system, and we adjourned indeed. Go ahead.
No, thank you very much. I think I was having a problem with raising my hand, and I even wrote in the comments to say, please allow me a chance.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lehohla, for the great presentation, and we really appreciate it on our side. I think just a comment that I wanted to make, or even a question that I wanted to make, I think it goes back to the North-South divide, whereby we look at the poverty state of how things are currently in South Africa. So even at the moment, when we look at the property developments that are currently happening, they are more focused on more developed cities like your Sandton and your Waterfall. So how do we then get investment to also focus on your poor areas, create a shift to also rural areas, rather than only focus on big cities? Because this also affect or create those crime that we were mentioning, to say poor people are then living rural areas, or they are not so developed areas to go and create or do crime in those cities that are now becoming more developed each and every time.
Super, thank you. Let me allow Dr. Mojalefa, and thank you, Dr. Shabangwani, you made a very good, relevant point. But if you do know also, one of the things at the charter that we do at the property sector charter, we've actually drive one of the economic development, which is development in under-resourced areas. You would recall that long time ago, you would never see development areas in the township, in the rural areas. That has come about because we've been encouraging and hopefully thinking a lot of the developers would actually take it to the rural areas. And you make a very true statement to say, should we not be doing more? And what we are doing, is it enough? Certainly not. Should we accelerate it? Without a doubt, there's no question that we should. And this is what we actually should do, particularly when you talk about things such as connectivity, Eskom. You know, how often do you go to the offices or in townships and anywhere closer where there's no connectivity? I mean, I normally give an example that we still have places in our country where people travel 4 hours just to go withdraw 50 Rand, only to find that even the ATM closer to that, you know, it's still not working because there's load shedding and so on, and all of those and this is the same country you and I live in. So that has actually become quite a challenge for all of us, and we need to do a lot more on it. Dr. Mojalefa and Dr. Lehohla, let me give you time to actually round up so that we can actually close the session. Over to you guys.
Dr. Mojalefa, you have 5 minutes to talk about this cycle.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm sorry I didn't prepare a nice presentation, but all I can say is that South Africa definitely shows signs of a great need for change, and all sectors of the society would actually be very eager for change. The only problem is that the South African intelligentsia seem to cede its power to one sector of the society called politics for the change they need. And that's why I don't think there'll ever be any change. If you look at history, change is driven by technology, particularly technology that harnesses energy to free us from being beasts of burden, or to make ourselves comfortable. Whereas before the first industrial revolution, people used to work very hard with their hands and using animals to plow and so on. There was coal, and as soon as an engine was discovered by a French physicist called Sadi Carnot, a steam engine liberated a lot of people, and that was a real revolution. It's not just political revolution of a government changing, like in Burkina Faso or elsewhere. That's socio-economic revolution. It meant that people would be free from having to use their hands, their bodies, and even their animals, and so on. And they could use machines that were driven by this technology that provides energy more efficiently. That was the first industrial revolution in the 19th century. In the 20th century, we improved on that by discovering nuclear energy. And in any case, when you have the energy technology, that spawns many other technologies because the science becomes richer and more research is being done. And unfortunately, because of racism and colonialism, all the benefits or the spin-offs of the first industrial revolution were mainly confined in the colonizing countries like in Western Europe and the United States of America or North America. The second industrial revolution, after the discovery of nuclear energy, gave us more technologies like computing or robotics. It improved our telephony into modern day telecommunications that is more sophisticated, which is even we are going even further into artificial intelligence. And that's because of the discovery of nuclear energy and the research that it spawned. Now, we just discovered, in fact, we just didn't discover recently, from the first industrial revolution, about 8 years after the discovery of the engine that harnessed coal or fossil fuel, some scientists began to be concerned about the impact of that technology, which happened not to be efficient. The Carnot engine, as we call it, it's still the same engine that we use today that was discovered 200 years ago. It will be 200 years in 2026. That engine is inefficient when you feed coal, say of 100 units, you only get heat that you need to be converted to work of 20% from that 100% coal that you fed in. 80% goes into incomplete combustion, carbon dioxide, nitrogen oxides, and waste heat. And the carbon dioxide and other emissions have been accumulating over the 200 years into the atmosphere, which led to what is now called global warming because of the greenhouse effect. Now, maybe I should explain that an engine is nothing but a device that converts heat to work. And work can be for mechanical motion, like in transportation, your car, or machines that we use, which is why we call this industrial revolution, because people were relieved of that. Nuclear energy was just an improvement on the efficiency of energy, because with nuclear energy, you burn very little nuclear material to get huge amount of energy. But we could not substitute, we could not replace fossil fuel, mainly because of this colonial hegemony, because that technology was also used for military purposes in the Western countries. And of course, the Soviet Union also discovered nuclear. In fact, the first nuclear reactor was built in the Soviet Union. But then that became a very militarized and secret technology that did not spread to the global south. Now, we are very fortunate that the energy system that was discovered by a Russian some 60 years ago is now beginning to show signs of correcting the inefficiency of the Carnot engine as we know it. This is called the Myashtchenko cycle, as opposed to Carnot cycle, for those who may have done some physics at first year university. Myashtchenko cycle is named for the inventor, the man called Valery Myashtchenko. We brought him here in April because we want to bring the technology here and have it commercialized. He discovered that you can harvest energy from the air. The air is made of dry air and water vapor. And in water vapor, you have what is called latent heat of vaporization. When we sweat, animals and even plants, when they sweat, they take away energy and they store it in the air. And that is called latent energy of vaporization, plus direct energy from the sun, which is called sensible heat. So you can harvest that energy to do work, because energy is the ability to do work. Let's take cooling, for example. You can harvest that energy to cool instead of using energy from the grid, from your fossil fueled power stations. So Maisetsenko came up with that M cycle, or which opposes Carnot cycle, and it is actually correcting the sins of emissions. And however, the Soviets militarized it and therefore kept secret. The Chinese have it now, and South Africa, we have an opportunity to commercialize it and make it available for the civilian society. What do you want me to say?
Yes, of course, Mujalepa is a nuclear scientist himself. So he wants to go into the deep science. The best is if we can have a session for us to show you the technology, because it has been transformed into instruments. And these instruments, basically, when you adopt this technology, reduce your consumption of energy by up to 90%. And the latest, which is generation 3, increases the savings by upwards of up to 50% of doing so. So in the current crisis that we have, in the current crises that multiple crises that we are talking about, energy, as Mujalepa says, can contribute significantly to change our fortunes in South Africa. We have the rights of research, manufacturing, and distribution of this technology. And we do have an opportunity to look at, you are in the building, in the industry of retail data centers, you know how big that market is. This energy is here. It can reduce the costs. It can improve our science. It can change lives for the poor. And it is available. I think if we have time to discuss it, it will be very desirable.
Well, what is most important is that it is indispensable in these times of global warming or climate change, because we certainly have to reduce emissions, and this technology does not emit anything. In fact, you can reduce the demand from the grid, for example, for cooling, which takes up to 50 to 60% of the cost of running, say, a data center. And I'm sure a mall also uses a lot of money for cooling in the summer. There you can relieve the demand from the grid and use this technology, because it uses energy from the air, free energy from the air, to do so. And also we also have to adapt to climate change. Every year, summers are becoming hotter and hotter, and the prediction is that unless we reverse the trend by 2060, this planet will not be livable. But between now and 2060, almost every household, every dwelling must have an air conditioner, a privilege that you only see in Western Europe and North America. You think of Africa, Nigerians are buying second-hand air conditioners, and they use gasoline to drive them, and it's quite a mess out there. So we have a technology here that can help us reduce emissions while relieving the demand from the grid, at the same time enabling us to adapt to climate change.
Thank you, Dr. Lehohla. I'll get an indication. I think we may just actually, with the interest, we may just actually probably organize another session just that would be dedicated, so that the industry can then get the details of how the system also works. But we will actually manage to actually share the video and the presentation, which actually will just give them a taste of what actually the system is all about. Let me thank everybody for for being able to join our session today. Dr Lehohla, once again, you've always been there and always at a call away from us, and always coming in to actually be able to share some of your intellectual capacity and knowledge around the system, and particularly on, and I see actually Dr Mpeti was also Marajalo was asking also about the fiscal planning policies that needs to change and unblock the economical participation. And these are amongst others that Dr Mjalifa is talking about, to being able to unlock and being able to allow the poverty-stricken citizens in our country to be able to participate. We do know the impact of load shedding and many of those other areas that actually have a negative impact to our economy and to the citizens at large. Everybody, let me sincerely thank you, all of you, every single one of you. Thank you once again for logging in and being able to alert us and really participating in this session. I'd like to thank once again to our participant, to our speaker, Dr Lehohla, to Mjalifa, also taking up on that system and being able to call on to the industry with that innovative system that we currently have. Thank you so much to the team behind that made it possible, that are there. And thank you once again. And let me send you love and light to all of you. Happy Tuesday once again. To all of you, thank you. Please log on into our YouTube. And that is actually our YouTube handles and addresses. And we will certainly be sending you. For those that did not get the register, please send it so that we can send you the presentation and also the video that you were not able to hear the sound on. Once again, thank you. My name is Portia Tausikati from the Property Sector Charter Council. Light and love to all of you. Thank you. And the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you.